You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Welcome, everyone, and we've made it. John, what's that old saying? Everyone's working for the weekend.
Yeah, that's where we've arrived. Almost by the time you're seeing this, it's weekend. Look, even by the time we're recording this, I'm just going to treat it like a weekend.
We're podcasting for the weekend.
Well, yes, exactly. Yeah. But here we are, Mission Log Engage, the show where we engage with your comments to us. And it's interesting because as we record this, we are coming up on our very last recording for Deep Space Nine. Yeah.
Indeed.
Wild, right?
It's
And
crazy.
yeah. So, and that gives us a chance to reflect. We got a little time off after this, and we'll get to kind of look back at DS9 and then plan for the future for our coverage of Voyager. But my point is, some of these comments that are coming at about DS9 specifically, and they might be about one particular aspect of DS9, gives us a chance to look back, and that's what we have today. So,
all righty. What do we got, John?
All right, we got an email from Jesse, and this is from a little while back. This is from several months ago, but I held on to it because it's relevant, as all of these are. And Jesse says, one question I've always had about the Changelings is why they look or present themselves the way they do. The observation goes like this. The founders present themselves to our characters looking much like Odo, slick back hair and smoothed out faces. Why? Presumably, Odo presents himself with slick back hair because he is mimicking Dr. Mora, his de facto father, whom we saw in Season 2. Also, Odo does not have the skill to shapeshift his face to be as detailed as a solid. We learn later that the founders have the skill to shapeshift into direct copies of humans, Klingons, etc. So why do they choose to present themselves as Odo's version of a humanoid approximation? Is it so that the Alpha Quadrant solids, who have already met Odo, will associate them with Odo? Is it so that Odo will see part of himself in the founders and they are trying to bring him back into the fold? Just a fun question I've always pondered about the founders. Let's be honest, it's probably so the audience knows that they are the same race as Odo. Thanks, guys. Love the show. Jesse. Yeah, it's kind of, I don't want to step on you here, Norman, but it's funny that Jesse has the in-universe reason and the production reason that he's,
a flawless display, a dazzling display of logic, as Spock would say.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's fair to say. There comes a point in time, I think, in everyone's longevity of a fandom where you can disassociate yourself from the fantasy of it and just understand the production reality of it, or kind of like these bold strokes of what the creators are trying to do with. It's like the Cardassians, right? All the Cardassians, they look fairly typical, the same, same height, same build, same weight, most of the time, because it's a silhouette. It's it's an easy way to identify that these are the Cardassians, whether they're lit, whether they're in shadow, that's who they are.
Right.
Same thing with the Changelings. It's so that no matter how they're lit, no matter how they're perceived by the audience, it's a very easy identifiable way of saying Changelings or founders or Odo's people. It was the same with Lost. I mean, Lost had so much more interaction with so many other different humanoid species. But when he took the form in the shuttlecraft at the beginning of that episode, he took the form of something that looked like Odo.
Yeah.
He could have been completely anything else, or with a facial structure that looked completely different. But because we have to make that audience connection so quickly to force the narrative or to create that the opinion that you're supposed to have of loss, then you have to do it in a way where it's not, it's not belaboring the point.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we are with the founders and that choice.
It is an interesting idea. I mean, you could say that the founders share a kind of cultural identity, a kind of almost like a genetic memory. So being a humanoid, and I forget, please correct me if I'm wrong, did they say at one point that the founders, the Changelings, had been solids and evolved to this point? Or I forget if that was something that was in their distant past, but I'm thinking back to the TNG episode, The Chase, where it's indicated that
Oh, right,
humanoid,
right.
humanoid
Mhm.
forms throughout the galaxy have some similar traits because there is a similar progenitor.
Mhm.
And I don't love that idea. I mean, okay, whatever, I'll go with it. But I wonder if there is something that's kind of baked into the founders' DNA almost. That's like, okay, a humanoid form is a humanoid form that we can take, and it is pretty smooth and featureless, but that's because it's easy for us to take that form. So
Mhm.
even Odo mimicking parts of Dr. Mora, and that is how we're first introduced to the idea. There may still be features there that are just like, well, this is how a founder takes on a humanoid form for itself, as opposed to being a direct copy of something that can be studied and viewed. But if you're trying to put together your own, it just might be more difficult. And
You know,
instead, you fall back on this kind of generic form.
it's an interesting way of looking at it, but if that's the case, then why go through shapeshifting all the details of certain cultural attachments like Odo
Mm.
and the Bajoran uniform and the Bajoran communicator, which for some reason works,
Right. Even those
even
part of
though
him.
it's part of him.
Right.
Like the
Right.
the female changeling makes it a little bit more of a better case because she's just wearing this very kind of like shapeless robe. So it
Yeah.
doesn't take a lot of energy for her to be able to maintain a certain specific characteristic or look. Here's the interesting thing though.
Okay.
Wouldn't it have been interesting that, if there was say a changeling that really liked hanging around with Klingons, but didn't have like ridges, or the ridges weren't as well defined,
Oh, interesting.
right?
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
Odo's more of kind of like this very like a gessoed canvas. He's a very kind of
Hmm.
generic blank slate where he can turn into something that has a lot more impressiveness when he actually changes and shapeshifts into a different being, as
Right.
opposed to kind of like that generic animatronic doll man that just has very basic features. But once you start adding on to it, it becomes something different. So uh,
Yeah.
I just think that going back to Jesse's final point, it's just a really easy way to be able to say founders, and then you can say evil, and then you can say enemy
Yeah.
and dominion.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I think so too. But and that is the production answer to it. But
mhm.
yeah, it does raise all these. But like, if Odo can become a very convincing mouse, that's a lot
Mhm.
of detail. It's tiny, all the little hairs and everything, and any of the founders can be an exact replica of a human that they meet or a Klingon that they meet, and get the voice down and everything. Okay, but thank you very much for letting us ponder that, Jesse. Norman, where can people find us?
Well, before we do that though, just think of
Oh,
how
yeah.
amazing that they would have been in the 24th century version of the Impossible Missions Force, where they can just
Oh, God,
literally
that would be
become their own
awesome.
masks,
New show, new
right?
show. Yeah. Very good.
On that note, thank you, Jesse, for sending in your email. And if you'd like to engage with us, with John and I, you can send us your comments to missionlog@roddenberry.com. You can also find us here and subscribe and share out this playlist on the Roddenberry YouTube Entertainment channel here, and where John and I do this live. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at Mission Log Pod. And remember, we may engage with your comments on the air.